Hi, welcome to Danny After Dark. If you're new here, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss a notification or a new episode. Tonight, I'll be featuring the case of Arthur Shawcross, also known as the Genesee River Killer. Let's go ahead and find out more. Let's go ahead and dive on in. Arthur Shawcross was born June 6, 1945 in Maine. He was born 2 months premature. His family moved to Watertown, New York when he was very young. Arthur had a hard time fitting in with the other children. He talked like a baby all the time, even up until he was 6 years old. He was also a chronic bedwetter. He started to run away at a young age, but he did this to seek attention. Arthur claimed he could never remember a time when he was not preoccupied with sex. Even as early as 8 years old, he frequently masturbated and progressed onto oral sex with both female and male friends. His sexual acts were not just limited to humans. He claims he also had sex with animals, particularly cows, sheep, horses, and also killed a chicken while having intercourse with it. He stated his introduction into sex was by his aunt when she made him go down on her. Well, this ended up being his favorite type of sexual act. By the time he was 14, he claims that he was having regular oral sex with his cousin and with his sister Jenny. He also claims that he had had another physical relationship with a young girl who lived nearby. One day, him and this girl were caught when he was having oral sex on her. The brother walked in. Well, Arthur claims the brother supposedly threatened to tell all of their parents what was happening unless Arthur performed oral sex on him as well. Well, Arthur also had a bit of a problem. He could not have any type of penetration, as he would quickly lose his erection. One day, on his way home from school, he stated he was picked up by a man in a car, and when he got in that car, the man held a knife to his throat and demanded that he perform oral sex on him. In this fear, while performing oral sex, Arthur himself was unable to reach orgasm. Well, the man became very angry and turned Arthur over and brutally sodomized him. From that point forward, Arthur could not reach orgasm if there was not physical pain being involved. Arthur became increasingly withdrawn, and by the 8th grade, he'd fallen behind 2 years compared to others his own age. His grades suffered immensely. He ended up dropping out of school altogether when he was only in the 9th grade. For the next few years, he went from job to job and ended up mingling with petty theft. Sometimes he was caught for these crimes. Now, 1964, Arthur found love. However, the marriage only lasted just about 4 years. From this marriage, the couple had a son. 1968, when he was only 19 years old, he enlisted in the Army. He was sent over and fought in the Vietnam War. Just before he was shipped to Vietnam, he found love again and married his second wife, a woman named Linda Neary. They'd only dated a short time before they got married. Arthur later told some of the atrocities he committed in Vietnam. Once, he found 2 Vietnamese women hiding in a shrub. So he shot one in the head and tied the other to a tree. One of the women, he took a slice from her thigh, cooked it, and ate it. He then cut off her head and put it on a pole for the enemy to find. The other woman, he made her perform oral sex on him, before he raped her at gunpoint, then shot her in the head to death. He would violently harm and murder several Asian prostitutes while he was in Vietnam. Well, now he'd served his time and he returned home. When he returned home, he began to brutally and aggressively beat his wife. Well, they didn't stay together very long after that, and they ended up divorcing. Now, Arthur went on to take a job at the Watertown Public Works Department as a handyman. Well, he ended up meeting another woman and married for the third time, his new wife, Penny Nickel. Penny was a school friend of his sister Jeannie, and each of them had a child from a former relationship. Arthur claimed that up until this time, he was still having a sexual relationship with his sister Jeannie. So it's interesting that Jeannie was the one to introduce Penny to her brother. Well, she did this because Penny was pregnant by her boyfriend and couldn't continue their relationship. Well, Arthur states that 5 months later, she ended up miscarrying the baby. Later, he claimed that the marriage came under threat when Penny's father accused Arthur of sexually assaulting Penny's younger sister. Now, May 1972, Watertown, New York. Arthur murdered a 10-year-old boy. He lured him to the woods, where he assaulted him, strangled him, and removed the boy's heart, genitals, and ate them. Only 4 months later, he raped, mutilated, and strangled to death an 8-year-old girl. Arthur ended up being arrested for these 2 crimes. He confessed to both murders, but he was able to obtain a plea bargain with the prosecutors. The plea bargain stated he would plead guilty to the killing of the girl on a charge of manslaughter instead of first-degree murder. The charge of killing the boy would be completely dropped. Prosecutors stated, even though they had a confession, there was little physical evidence to go on. So that's why they dropped that charge. He was given a 25-year sentence. While he was in jail, he was reportedly a model prisoner. As we know, terms are usually not carried out to their fullest. Arthur served only 15 years before he was released and then on parole in March 1987. He had difficulty settling down as he was chased out of homes and fired from workplaces as soon as people found out about his past, specifically his criminal record. So he needed a fresh start. So he moved to Rochester, New York, and he lived with a woman named Clara. Well, she was kind enough to lend him her car when he needed to use it. He would use her car while committing some of his upcoming crimes. Starting in March 1988, Arthur claimed 11 victims before he was captured less than 2 years later. His victims were usually strangled and beaten to death. Most were mutilated as well. A majority of them were found near, you guessed it, the Genesee River. Now I'm going to give a little bit about each victim. These are all Arthur's events and statements as to what happened. First, a prostitute named Dorothy. He pulled her over and asked, did he want a date? He told her he wanted to have mutual oral sex. She then undressed and complied with his request. She then bit him on the penis, drawing blood. He bit her vagina in retaliation and squeezed her throat until she lost consciousness. Next, a prostitute named Anna, who Arthur had picked up. She'd offered him sex in exchange for $20, but he was unable to get an erection, so she began to make fun of him. He became very angry and punched her to the ground. she tried to get away from him and crawled into the water that was nearby. But he went in after her and held her underwater by her throat until she drowned. Next, a 58-year-old homeless woman named Dorothy. Arthur met Dorothy when she worked as a waitress in a diner that he would frequently go to. Well, the two struck up a conversation that led to a friendship. That friendship quickly turned into an affair. One afternoon they were together and they got into an argument. He claimed he became so angry that he picked up a small log and beat her on the side of the head, killing her instantly. Next, a prostitute named Patty. He picked her up, and while they were having sex, he states that he caught her trying to remove his wallet. So in return, he pushed her hard against the ground. Well, she began to cry, so he anally raped her and then began strangling her until she died. Next, a prostitute named Frances. He claims to have choked her with his penis while they were having oral sex. But it didn't stop there. After she died, he continued to have oral sex with her body. Next, a friend of Arthur named June. Arthur asked her to go for a ride with him. So they went to the beach and started having sex. He says he made an innocent comment about her not being a virgin, and she started screaming. Well, he held his hand over her mouth to silence her, but soon realized that he had suffocated her. But it didn't end there. He then cut her open with his knife and then removed her vagina and some of her organs and ate them. Next, a prostitute named Maria. He claims she tried to take his wallet, so to get back at her, he strangled her. Next, a prostitute named Darlene. After the money was exchanged, they indulged in oral sex, but Arthur failed to get an erection. Well, she became frustrated and started calling him names. So he choked her until she laid dead under him. Next, a prostitute named Elizabeth. They had oral sex in the car, and Arthur claimed she tried to take his wallet. Well, he got so angry that he strangled her to death. Next, a prostitute named June. Arthur brought her to an isolated area and attempted to have oral sex with her before strangling her. 2 days later, he returned to the dump site with a small handsaw, and he cut her vagina from her frozen body and ate it. Next, a prostitute named Felicia. Arthur strangled her and dumped her body. Well, now, the police were involved, clearly, and they decided that the last victim's body that was found in January 1990, they weren't going to remove it. They were going to leave it and keep surveillance on the area. This decision was made based on a psychological profile that suggested the killer would return to the scene. Well, that decision paid off. The police ended up finding Arthur masturbating as he sat in a car on a bridge over the creek where the body of that final victim was floating. He was arrested and eventually confessed while he was in police custody. November 1990, Arthur was tried for 10 of the 11 murders in Monroe County. The trial was televised. He pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. However, the jury found him sane and found him guilty. The judge sentenced him to 250 years in prison. A few months later, Arthur was taken to Wayne County to be tried for that one other murder, adding up to the 11 murders in total. Rather than claim insanity, he just straight up pled guilty. He was given a life sentence. July 10th, 1997, Arthur married his longtime sweetheart, Clara Neal, at the Sullivan County Correctional Facility in a jailhouse ceremony. Now, September 19th, 1999, Arthur was punished with 2 years to be served in solitary confinement, and he lost his art privileges for 5 years. This was because he was having people sell his art paintings on eBay. If none of you have heard of the Son of Sam law, this would be the time to look it up. This is why a person in jail cannot make money from their crimes. Now, November 10th, 2008, Arthur went into cardiac arrest and died. He was only 63 years old. And that is the story of Arthur Shawcross. Thank you for sticking around for another episode of Danny After Dark. Do you have a question or a comment about the case? Leave it down below. Let's be interactive. Do you have a suggestion for a case that you'd like me to cover? Well, leave it down below, and you may see it featured in an upcoming episode. Until next time, remember, we don't live in darkness. Darkness lives in us.